All right, so today we're going to be taking a deep dive into AB 2347.
Yeah.
Specifically looking at how this new law is going to impact tenants facing evictions in California.
Right.
And we've got a ton of sources here. Legal analyses,
Okay.
practical guides for landlords, even some FAQs to kind of break it all down.
All right.
So for our listeners out there who really want to understand what's changing and what this means for them, we're going to try to unpack all of that today.
Sounds good.
One thing that really jumps out from these sources is that AB 2347,
Yeah.
it's not just a small change. It really kind of throws a wrench into the whole eviction process in California.
Yeah, I mean, it really does shake things up, especially when it comes to the timeline.
Right.
You know, starting January 1st, 2025, we're kissing goodbye to that super short 5-day response time.
So no more like scrambling the moment you get that notice on your door.
Exactly. It's gone. It's out the window.
Wow.
AB 2347 gives tenants a full 10 business days to respond to an eviction lawsuit.
The 10 business days.
10 business days, which, you know, might seem like a small change on paper, but in reality, that can be huge for tenants.
I mean, I can imagine just having that extra time to kind of wrap your head around what's going on and figure out your next steps.
Totally. I mean, think about it like someone who, you know, maybe they lost their job unexpectedly and they missed a rent payment.
Yeah.
Under that old 5-day rule, it's like a ticking time bomb, you know?
Totally panic mode.
Exactly. You might make rash decisions, miss important deadlines for defending yourself. But with 10 business days, that same person has a chance to breathe. You know, they can contact legal aid, explore payment options with their landlord, maybe even find some temporary financial assistance.
It's like you're saying it gives them the space to strategize.
Absolutely.
Instead of just reacting.
It's a total game changer.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this shifts the power dynamic a little bit.
Yeah.
But I got to ask, I mean, how are landlords feeling about this?
Yeah. Oh, they're definitely going to have to adjust. Yeah. You know, this new law means landlords need to prepare for these longer timelines and potentially longer periods without rental income.
So it's like they need a whole new playbook.
Exactly. They got to rethink their strategy. You know, things like rent loss insurance might become a lot more common.
Interesting.
Yeah, times are changing.
Okay, so we've talked about the timeline, but I want to dive into something a little more complex.
Sure.
Demurs and motions to strike.
Okay.
These are legal tools that come up a lot in eviction cases.
Yeah.
Could you break those down for our listeners who maybe aren't familiar with the legal jargon?
Yeah, so basically a demur is like saying, even if everything in this lawsuit is true, the landlord still can't evict me because they didn't follow the rules.
Interesting.
A motion to strike is similar, but it focuses on removing specific parts of the lawsuit that are like irrelevant or improper.
Got it.
Now, AB 2347 brings some order to how these things are handled. It sets clear deadlines for filing, responding, and scheduling hearings.
So it's bringing more structure to a potentially messy process.
Definitely. And that can help both sides.
So even though this is complex legal stuff, the added structure from AB 2347 is trying to make things a little more clear and predictable for everyone.
Yep.
Okay, I see that.
Yeah.
But wouldn't all this potentially drag out the process even more?
It could, but the law actually tries to address that.
Okay.
Like, for example, there's a possibility that oral arguments could replace those super long written responses.
Interesting.
Which could actually speed things up.
So it's like they're trying to find that balance between giving tenants more time, but also keeping things moving.
Absolutely.
All right, so since our listeners are particularly interested in the benefits for tenants, what's your top advice for someone who gets hit with an eviction notice?
Okay, first things first. Don't panic.
Okay.
You have more time now than you used to. Remember that.
Yeah.
And the most important thing is to document everything.
Really? Everything?
Everything. Keep records of every interaction with your landlord, every payment.
Wow.
Every repair request. Like, build that paper trail from day one.
So it's all about having that evidence.
Absolutely. It can make or break your case. But even with good documentation, I would strongly recommend getting legal help as soon as possible.
Yeah.
An attorney who specializes in tenant rights can guide you through the process. Make sure you understand your rights under AB 2347 and help you build the strongest defense possible.
So it's like having an expert in your corner to help navigate this complex legal maze.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so we've covered a lot about the nuts and bolts of AB 2347.
We have.
But how does this new law fit in with all the other tenant protection laws we have here in California? Like, especially rent control.
Yeah.
California has a lot of different regulations.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
So AB 2347 doesn't actually change rent control laws directly, but it works with them. It adds an extra layer of protection.
I see.
Especially for tenants in areas with strong rent control measures.
So it's like for those tenants, AB 2347 gives them more time to actually use those protections.
Exactly. For example, let's say a landlord tries to evict someone for a reason that might violate rent control, like an unjustified rent increase. With this extra time under AB 2347, that tenant has more breathing room.
Right.
They can gather evidence, talk to a rent board, maybe even take legal action.
Wow, it sounds like this could be a really powerful tool for tenants.
It could be, especially when you think about what's at stake.
Right, we're talking about people's homes, their stability, their lives.
Exactly. Losing your housing can affect every part of your life.
Absolutely.
And it can be even more devastating for vulnerable populations like seniors, families with children,
right,
or people with disabilities.
And speaking of vulnerable tenants, does AB 2347 offer them any specific protections?
Yes, it does. It actually includes several provisions that are specifically aimed at protecting these groups.
Okay.
For instance, landlords now have to take extra steps to make sure eviction notices are properly served and understood by tenants who might face language barriers or have disabilities.
So it's not just about giving everyone more time. It's about making the process itself more accessible and more equitable.
Exactly. It recognizes that one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't work.
Right.
Landlords have to consider each tenant's individual circumstances and ensure they have a fair chance to understand and respond.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And it seems like all of this really gets at the heart of what AB 2347 is trying to do.
It does.
It's trying to strike this balance between protecting tenants' rights, but also recognizing that landlords have rights too.
Yeah, it's definitely a balancing act. The goal is to create a more level playing field where tenants have a real opportunity to defend themselves while still acknowledging landlords' rights to manage their property.
We've talked a lot about the specifics of the law, the changes, the procedures, the deadlines. But I'm curious about the bigger picture. Why is this law so significant?
It's a really important question. What's interesting about AB 2347 is that it reflects this broader societal shift.
Okay.
We're seeing this growing recognition of the housing crisis in California and the need for stronger tenant protections.
Right. Evictions are a huge problem.
They are. They can be devastating, not just for individuals, but for entire communities. They can lead to displacement, homelessness, families being torn apart.
It's not just a legal issue, it's a human issue.
Exactly. And AB 2347 is an attempt to address that human side of things.
Yeah.
It's about giving tenants more power in a system that has often felt stacked against them.
And California has been a leader in tenant rights for a while now.
It has.
So would you say AB 2347 is part of this larger movement towards a more equitable housing system?
Absolutely. It's part of this ongoing conversation about how to create a housing system that works for everyone,
right? Not
just a select few. It's a step towards recognizing housing as a fundamental human right.
I like that. So looking ahead, what do you think the future holds for evictions in California?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
It's hard to say for sure, but AB 2347 is definitely a significant step forward.
Good.
It sets a precedent for prioritizing tenant protections and ensuring a fairer process.
That's great.
But we have to remember that laws are only as good as their implementation.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it means we need to make sure AB 2347 is actually making a difference in people's lives.
Okay.
It requires a collaborative effort from everyone involved.
So landlords, tenants, the courts?
Exactly. Everyone needs to work together to make sure the law is applied fairly and effectively.
Right.
That means educating people about the new rules, providing access to resources, and holding those who violate the law accountable.
So there's still work to be done even after the law takes effect.
There is. It's not a magic solution.
Right. It's a step in the right direction.
It is. And while AB 2347 has the potential to make a real difference, it's not the end of the journey.
Right.
We need to keep pushing for policies and solutions that address the root causes of the housing crisis.
Like what kind of things?
Well, things like the lack of affordable housing, stagnant wages, systemic inequalities.
It's a complex problem with no easy answers.
It really is.
Yeah.
But I believe that if we can effectively implement AB 2347 and keep pushing for broader systemic change, we can create a fairer, more stable housing landscape for everyone in California.
I hope so.
A landscape where everyone has access to safe, affordable housing regardless of their circumstances.
That's a great goal.
It is.
Well, this has been a really insightful conversation.
It has.
It's clear that AB 2347 is a game changer.
Yeah, it is.
And we'll definitely be following its impact closely in the months and years to come.
It'll be fascinating to see how it all unfolds and what long-term changes it brings to California's housing landscape.
Absolutely. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today, exploring the ins and outs of AB 2347.
We have.
And especially how it aims to create a fair eviction process for tenants here in California.
Right.
But like with any new law, I imagine there are going to be some growing pains.
Oh, for sure.
And some unforeseen challenges as it goes into effect.
Absolutely. We're still in the early stages of implementation, so there will definitely be bumps along the way.
Right.
One area I'm particularly curious about is how the courts will actually interpret and apply all the nuances of this law.
Yeah, I mean, legal language can be so complex.
It can be.
And there's always that uncertainty when you're dealing with new legislation.
Exactly.
So it sounds like we'll need to keep an eye on how those legal precedents are set.
Yeah.
And how different interpretations might emerge.
Absolutely.
And it goes beyond just the legal interpretation, right?
Right.
Like, we need to see how this plays out in the real world.
Exactly.
Will landlords actually adapt their procedures? Will tenants be aware of their expanded rights and know how to exercise them?
Right.
These are all questions that we'll only be able to answer as AB 2347 is put into practice over the next few months and years.
Time will tell.
And that brings us back to you, our listener. We've given you a lot to consider today.
We have.
But ultimately, it's up to each individual to stay informed and engaged.
Absolutely.
AB 2347 has the potential to really reshape the eviction landscape in California.
It does.
But its success depends on all of us.
Yeah.
Understanding it and actively participating in the process.
Couldn't agree more.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into AB 2347, let's leave you with a final thought-provoking question.
All right, I like it.
This law aims to create a more balanced and equitable eviction process. But it's just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
Right.
The real challenge lies in addressing the root causes of the housing crisis.
Absolutely.
Things like the lack of affordable housing, stagnant wages, systemic inequality.
All those big issues.
These are all things that contribute to this problem.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. AB 2347 is a step in the right direction, but it's not a cure-all. We need to keep the pressure on to keep advocating for policies and solutions that tackle those deeper systemic problems.
So it's a reminder that change requires ongoing effort and engagement from all of us.
From all of us.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of AB 2347.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you found it informative and, most importantly, empowering.
Yeah, knowledge is power.
Exactly. Especially when it comes to protecting your rights.
Absolutely. And if you're facing a potential eviction, don't hesitate to reach out for help.
That's right.
There are resources available to guide you through this process.
Absolutely. Don't be afraid to seek legal counsel and support. And for those of you in Southern California, the Martinez Law Center specializes in tenant rights and eviction defense.
They do great work.
You can find more information on their website at martinezlawcenter.com.
Yeah, check them out.
They're there to help you navigate these challenging situations.
Absolutely.
All right, that's all for today's deep dive into AB 2347.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.
See ya. It's like having a guide in a complex legal maze. Speaking of nuances, how does this new law interact with existing tenant protection laws?
Right.
Particularly rent control. California has quite the patchwork of regulations.
It does. Yeah, that's a great question. And it's where things get really interesting.
So AB 2347 doesn't directly alter rent control laws, but it works in tandem with them adding an extra layer of protection.
I see.
Especially in areas with strong rent control measures.
So for tenants living in rent-controlled units, AB 2347 essentially gives them more time to leverage those existing protections.
Precisely. Let's say a landlord tries to evict a tenant for a reason that might violate rent control, like an unjustified rent increase.
Right.
With the extended time frame under AB 2347, that tenant now has more breathing room to gather evidence, consult with a rent board, or even pursue legal action.
It sounds like this law could be a powerful tool, especially considering what's at stake. We're talking about people's homes, their stability, their lives.
You're absolutely right. Losing your housing can have a ripple effect on every aspect of your life.
Yeah.
The impact can be even more severe for vulnerable populations.
Right.
Like seniors, families with children, or individuals with disabilities.
And speaking of vulnerable tenants, does AB 2347 offer them any specific protections?
Yes, it does. The law includes several provisions specifically aimed at protecting these groups.
Okay.
For instance, landlords are now obligated to take additional steps to ensure eviction notices are properly served and understood by tenants facing language barriers or disabilities.
So it's not just about giving everyone more time, it's about making sure the process itself is more accessible and equitable.
Exactly. It acknowledges that a one-size-fits-all approach to evictions simply doesn't work.
Right.
The law requires landlords to consider the individual circumstances of each tenant, ensuring they have a fair chance to understand and respond to the situation.
This all circles back to the core benefits of AB 2347. It seems like this law is trying to strike a delicate balance between protecting tenants' rights and acknowledging the legitimate interests of landlords.
It's definitely a balancing act. The goal is to create a more level playing field in the eviction process,
Right.
where tenants have a genuine opportunity to defend their rights while still recognizing landlords' rights to manage their property.
We've spent a lot of time talking about the what of AB 2347, the change to the procedures, the deadlines, but I'm curious about the why. Why is this law so significant in the bigger picture?
That's a crucial question. What's fascinating about AB 2347 is that it reflects a broader societal shift, a growing recognition of the housing crisis in California and the urgent need for stronger tenant protections. Evictions can be devastating not just for individuals, but for entire communities.
Right.
They can lead to displacement, homelessness, and even the fracturing of families.
So it's not just a legal issue, it's a human issue with far-reaching consequences.
Precisely. AB 2347 is an attempt to address that human side of the equation. It's about empowering tenants in a system that has often felt stacked against them.
And as you mentioned earlier, California has been a leader in tenant rights legislation. Does that mean AB 2347 is part of a larger movement toward a more equitable housing landscape?
Absolutely. It's part of an ongoing conversation about how to create a housing system that genuinely works for everyone, not just a select few.
Okay.
It's a step towards recognizing housing as a fundamental human right.
I like that. So, looking ahead, what does the future hold for evictions in California? What happens after AB 2347 takes effect?
That's the million-dollar question, and one that's difficult to answer definitively. What we can say is that AB 2347 is a significant step forward. It sets a precedent for prioritizing tenant protections and ensuring a fairer process.
Okay.
However, it's crucial to remember that laws are only as good as their implementation.
What does that mean in practical terms? How do we ensure AB 2347 actually makes a difference?
It requires a collaborative effort from all stakeholders. Landlords, tenants, and the courts all need to work together to ensure AB 2347 is applied fairly and effectively.
So landlords, tenants, the courts.
That means educating everyone about the new rules, providing access to resources, and holding those who violate the law accountable.
So there's still work to be done even after the law goes into effect.
Yeah.
It's not a magic bullet solution.
You're right. While AB 2347 has the potential to make a real difference in people's lives, it's not the end of the journey.
Okay.
We need to keep pushing for policies and solutions that address the root causes of the housing crisis. Things like the lack of affordable housing, stagnant wages, and systemic inequalities.
It sounds like a complex challenge with no easy answers.
It is. But I believe that if we can effectively implement AB 2347 and continue pushing for broader systemic change, we can create a fairer, more stable housing landscape for everyone in California. A landscape where everyone has access to safe, affordable housing regardless of their circumstances.
Well said. This has been a truly insightful conversation. It's clear that AB 2347 is a game changer, and we'll definitely be following its impact closely in the coming months and years.
It will be fascinating to see how it all unfolds and what long-term changes it brings to California's housing landscape.
All right, so we've spent this whole deep dive really getting into the weeds of AB 2347.
We have.
And how it's going to change the game for tenants facing evictions here in California.
Yep. Big changes coming.
But as with any big change in the law, I imagine there are going to be some hiccups along the way.
Oh, definitely. I mean, we're still in the early stages of figuring out how this is all going to work in practice.
Right. So what are you most curious about as we move forward with this new law?
Well, for me, it's how the courts are going to interpret and apply all the little details of this law.
Because legal language can be so dense.
It really can. And there's always that uncertainty when you have a brand new law on the books.
So we'll need to see how those legal precedents are set.
Exactly. And how different judges might interpret things differently.
Right. And it goes beyond just the legal side of things too, right?
Absolutely.
We need to see how AB 2347 actually plays out in real life.
Yeah. Will landlords change their processes? Will tenants even know about their new rights and how to use them?
So many questions.
I know, right? We'll only get those answers as we see AB 2347 in action over the coming months and years.
It's going to be fascinating to watch it all unfold.
It really is.
And that brings us back to you, our listener.
Well,
we've thrown a lot of information your way today.
We have.
But at the end of the day, it's up to each and every one of you to stay informed and engaged.
Absolutely.
This law, AB 2347, has the potential to fundamentally change evictions in California.
It really does.
But its success depends on all of us understanding it and using it to advocate for ourselves and our communities.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
So as we wrap up our deep dive on AB 2347, let's leave you with one final thought.
Okay, hit me with it.
This law is all about creating a fairer, more balanced process for evictions. But it's just one step on a much longer road.
That's true.
The real challenge, the one we all need to keep working on, is tackling the root causes of the housing crisis.
The big systemic issues.
Exactly. Things like the lack of affordable housing, stagnant wages, the systemic inequalities that make it so hard for people to find and keep stable housing.
We can't forget about those bigger problems.
AB 2347 is a step in the right direction.
It is.
But it's not a magic solution.
Nope. We need to keep pushing for change on all levels.
It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in making housing more affordable and accessible for everyone.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into AB 2347.
My pleasure.
We hope you found it informative and empowering.
Knowledge is power.
And remember, if you're facing an eviction or any kind of housing issue, don't be afraid to reach out for help.
There are resources out there to support you.
Absolutely.
Oh.
And that's it for today's show. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time. See ya.
Call now 714-442-9741. Thank you.